Hey everybody, it's Broken Dice. This is going to be a little bit of an evaluation video on my solo wargaming um, experiment with strategic points, values, and stuff. Um, First of all, it's a little bit of review. Strategic points for me are those things that you can acquire while playing the game so you can upgrade units, um, resupply an army, whatever you want to use them for, okay? Um, because sometimes in our games, especially if you're doing linked campaigns, it's important to have stuff like that because it gives the fact that these games are linked together some extra value, some extra juice, let's say, for wanting to have certain things happen on the table. So I was looking for a system or a way of controlling that when I'm doing a solo game. So, the problem with solo gaming is, we know too much. So I tend to like to do what I usually call the view from above, where I'm kind of like observing this encounter rather than dictating outcomes of an encounter. And I find that far more interesting than me setting up something and then trying to overcome it, which is which I find a little bit more interesting in a little bit like later time periods when you can set up entrenched defensive positions or fortifications or trench lines or something like that. That I'm trying to figure out the best mathematical way to overcome this fixed defensive position, so you don't have to worry about maneuvering a different army and then kind of finagling your own victory. Let's just say. Well, in this system, whatever rule system you use and how whatever points value your units are not affected by this. Um, so we're not going to discuss, troop types and how many points they cost and what they are. I'm just talking about points for off-table stuff that doesn't occur on the table, but it occurs between linked games or in a campaign or something like that. So what I do as a solo player is I will roll a dice for each unit on the table and give that unit a value. And what I've been using is just poker chips to represent this strategic point value. And what I noticed in the games that I played with this, that if the strategic points value for each side is fairly equal, I mean, pretty close to being just even up, um, it doesn't affect your strategy too much because whatever you lose somewhere, you have the opportunity to make it up someplace else. That's all well and good. That's like, let's just say, like, this unit over here has a green chip, which is 3 points, and this unit over here has a blue chip, which is worth 2 strategic points. Okay. Uh, Obviously, the unit on the right is an elite unit of infantry, and the unit on the left is just your standard sparrow bar infantry, not elite, just your normal unit. Um, this conflict here, I mean, win or lose, strategic point wise, it's not going to be devastating to either side. Um, it's just going to be like 2 or 3 points, which, if it's fairly even out through across the table, you can kind of see where it's not going to dictate too much your tactical on table decision making. If, on the other hand, let's just say that everything is the same and it's equal up, then it definitely not going to make any decision, you know, any effect on your decision making on the table. You're just going to play the game out according to the rule system that you have, and acquire your strategic points or lose your strategic points accordingly. The difference comes in is when that disparity starts getting greater. So let's just say we have this unit's worth 4 points, and this unit is only worth 1 point of strategic value. The owning player of this elite infantry unit has to consider the chances of him not only losing the unit in a combat, plus losing a significant number of strategic points. Now, the player that has the unit with the least amount of points, the spare bar unit, having only 1 point of strategic value, and probably costs less than that Hypaptus unit does for a Macedonian army, would be a little bit more aggressive with that. The odds are against it, but the rewards are great if you could pull it off. Especially like if you could combine this with some supports and kind of within the game system, whatever you're using, readjust the balance of power. Let's just say. So this becomes a very big decision-making process for the owner of the Hypapsis unit because of the amount of points that could be lost if he loses that unit. Not only in the value of the unit itself, but also in strategic points. Now, on the opposite view, let's just say that we randomly roll a 5 value for this unit and a 2 value for the Hypaptus. Now, the tactical decisions for the person owning the spare bar unit become different. Facing an elite infantry unit that has high value on the table, which basically equates to their stat line is much better than this unit's stat line. Their strategic point value is fairly low, and they're going against a unit that is traditionally weaker in combat, has a low, let's just go with lower stat line, because this can be used in all kinds of different gaming systems. A lower stat line, but a higher level of strategic points for whatever reason. This could give you the idea of a storyline where maybe an important personages in that unit, and that's what makes that unit's strategic point value so high. Maybe I don't know. It could be anything. When you do storylines, it's just endless what you can come up with. I don't want to even delve into that topic in this video, but you can see where this person here now has some tremendous tactical decisions to make. Do they even deploy them close enough to the enemy to risk it? You know what I mean? Or do they use them in a way that is completely different than what is traditionally used on the table for that unit? Instead of placing them in the center of the army, maybe they're placed on the edge. So that gives the owning player of a low tactical value unit with high strategic point values, that becomes a very large part of decision making on the tabletop. So in solo wargaming, when I do this, I deploy my army first, and then I roll the dice for strategic point value. That makes it a very complicated issue because my troops are already deployed, and now I'm going to have to, if I run into this situation, I'm going to have to readjust my lines and do stuff to try to mitigate losing so many points strategically. Tactically, this unit and that, the rules system that you use are going to dictate that kind of value. So you'll have to deal with that. But with this was an interesting way of doing a solo war game, because it changes the kind of the way that you you look at your tactics, because not only can you lose the unit, but you can also lose strategic point values, which can give the opposite side of the table, the let's just say the AI version, if you're playing against something or if you're doing like a view from above, one side of the table could take those points and then begin to create a scenario in which you're now at a tremendous disadvantage, which is always fun to do when you're doing solo wargaming, because why not do something that causes you to have some decision making, problem solving exercises? All right, that's the first kind of little bit of a review. It took a little bit longer than what I wanted to, but I hope you get the gist of what I'm trying to get out of this. It's like I want something a little extra, but I don't want it to destroy the rules. Or what did the kids used to say years ago? Oh, I broke the system. Back when the meta thing became a big deal, it was always about breaking the system. Breaking the rule. Not breaking the rules so much, but manipulating them in such a way that you get an unfair advantage, or if it's in the rules, not an unfair advantage, but you've just really skewed things to your advantage. And I don't know. I, I caution against that, because once you break it, you're doing something else. You're not doing the rule system that you're using. You've actually created something else. Maybe that's what the whole goal was for them. I don't know. But anyway, that brings us to the end of this sort of little recap. I know it's kind of I've done several videos on this, and it seems like a very short and kind of I don't know, I thought it would be a little bit more pervasive in this, but it really comes down to two things: the tactical value on the table and the allotted strategic points for the unit. If you have high tactical value on the table, and you have low strategic value, then you can use that unit the way it was designed. And you can be aggressive with it, because you're going to use it the way it was designed to be used. Okay. Now, what happens is, if you have a unit of low tactical value on the table but high strategic point value, that gives you a tremendous amount of decision making to go in. How are you going to use it? When are you going to risk it? Are you going to risk it at all? Or are you just going to let it kind of hide out in the background and not do anything at all with it, and try to preserve it? If you look on the top corner, there's a couple of Seath-wheeled chariots up there. They are a different sort of animal in this sort of a situation, because in Hail Caesar and a lot of rule systems, they're like a one and done. You throw them out, they do their damage, and then you remove them from the table. In a couple of my earlier, in one, especially one earlier video, they had high strategic point value, but their tabletop value is very limited. Their tactical value is really, they go out, they do their damage, but then you remove them. Well, you automatically lose those strategic points. And if they're very high, and these are they have that rule where it's a frenzied charge, or that kind of thing, where you don't really control it. Like if they're within their charge distance, they automatically charge, but then they're also automatically removed from the table. uh it's one of those, when you've got units like that, you must be aware that that's what's going to happen. And it could be that maybe you try to keep them from charging out too soon, or charging in, but it's very difficult to do because they have a very large charge range. And if you're in line of sight with them and you're within range, sorry for your luck, they got to go. So units like that, like berserkers maybe, or some sort of fanatical type of units. I remember playing Warhammer back in the day, and you always tried to draw out those goblin fanatics with the ball and the jade and things. It's that sort of thing with units like that. If they have a high strategic point value and you're going to automatically lose them as soon as they hit a unit, that that can be worrisome for the player. Okay. Um, in the next video, we'll talk about how to take these strategic point values and turn them into something that can affect the tabletop. Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of this part of the review. So everybody stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you next time.